Hello and welcome to another edition of GNAT-TV's In-Depth series. I'm Andrew McKeever, the news director here at GNAT-TV's News Project, and it's a pleasure to have you with us today. It's also a great pleasure to have with us today in the studio Erica Marthage, who is the state's attorney for Bennington County. She is running for re-election to that post in the Democratic primary, which will be taking place on August 14th. And while that seems like that's a good 6 or so weeks away, early voting will be starting roughly around July 1st, so not too early to start sharpening the pencils around all of this, I guess. Ms. Marthage is a resident of Manchester, and she faces a competitive primary battle this year. She's being challenged by Arnold Gottlieb of Dorset for the state's attorney position. She has served 3 full terms in that job since 2006 and is running for a 4th term this year. Each county in Vermont has a state's attorney's position, and the office is basically responsible for prosecuting cases that are brought before it by law enforcement, social service agencies, or by members of the public. And the role of the state's attorney is to represent the public in prosecuting such cases and seek justice in the outcome. Erica, again, great to have you with us today, and welcome back to GNAT.
Thank you, Andrew.
I was just thinking, just to get us started here, tell us a little bit about your career and background before you became the state's attorney in 2006 or 2007, I guess was when the office actually kicked in. How did you get there?
So I grew up in Manchester, was educated here, went to the Manchester Elementary School, then to Burton. And during my time at Burton, I was involved in athletics, but I also really enjoyed any of the classes that had to do with government and justice and the criminal justice system. So I followed that path to college. I went to the University of Vermont, had a few periods of time where I had to work to pay to get myself through college. But when I graduated college, I went to the University of Connecticut School of Law. For those that don't know, the University of Connecticut offers in-state tuition for Vermont residents. So that was a good option for someone like myself who always intended on coming back to Vermont and didn't want to be saddled with debt for the rest of my life. So that was a practical and great decision for me because I enjoyed my time there. I got to work with the Hartford State's Attorney's Office and in the major felony unit. So it was a different environment, different community, different approach to criminal law in Connecticut than here. And so as soon as I had the opportunity to come back and get admitted here, I returned to Vermont, Manchester specifically. My family's here, my social network's here, so I wanted to bring people of my age back to Vermont for professional careers so we can develop the community.
So you were the deputy attorney before you became the state's attorney. I guess I was just wondering, has the job changed much since you first started? Or is it basically the same thing?
It's changed in a number of ways, I think, and perspectives. The criminal justice field is always changing. So we, every year, have a long list of bills that deal with criminal justice that we are always trying to hone what's the best approach to various situations or cases. How do we best protect public safety? How do we get justice for victims? And how do we help people that have just gone awry of the law but are not necessarily criminals? So it's changed in that the paradigm of how we look at it has changed, but also the tools that we have to use have changed. Obviously, the opiate crisis has had a significant impact throughout all levels of what my office does. So we deal with child protective cases as well. My office files all of those, as well as the criminal matters dealing with opiate addiction, the sale of opiates, heroin, overdose deaths. So, a little known fact is that my office actually has to take all of the untimely death phone calls. So if someone dies in this county and it's not under the care of a physician, by statute, the police have to inform me, and I have to make a decision about how that's going to be treated going forward. If it's something that looks like there had been a crime committed or that it was otherwise an unnatural death. So that is something that is one of the more difficult parts of my job, because frequently, being from here, I know the people that we're talking about and who we're getting the calls from, and can only imagine the impact that has on families. So.
Well, one of the issues that's come up in the course of this primary campaign here is whether or not Bennington County should have a drug court. I've seen that mentioned in a couple of places. Does that strike you as a good idea, or something we should be doing, or is there a reason not to have one?
Well, it was a great idea back in 2004, 2005, when the legislature assigned funding to that project. Shortly thereafter, they cut funding for a drug court in Bennington. And it had to do with a number of factors, not the least of which is we just don't have the social services structure, service-based clinicians, people that could actually follow through on all the services that were requested. For example, we don't have a methadone clinic in Bennington. You have to go to Brattleboro or Rutland. Now North Adams is an option for folks, but for the people that are on medication-assisted treatment, they need access to those services. And so it was, more than 10 years ago, the legislators decided that drug court was not a good fit for Bennington County, and in fact, not a good fit for the majority of the counties that they had been looking at it in the state. So that's when they came up with, T.J. Donovan started the Rapid Intervention Program in Burlington to some success, and that was what was used kind of as a model for other communities to try to come up with these programs on their own, or best case scenario, get them funded and have someone running the program. Here in Bennington, we didn't have that opportunity early on, so my office and the service providers in the community, the people that all work in recovery and treatment, the social services, Department of Children and Families, Department of Corrections, we came together as a group and said, how do we make this happen here, absent funding and a position that pays for it? And so that was a really grassroots kind of movement on the part of the people that were already working with this population. The judges were very good about bringing folks back and really following a model similar to drug court, but just without the funding and the title. So.
Interesting. One of the questions I know that also probably is one that you have to deal with is when you're prosecuting drug cases or opiate cases, you have two classes of people who are possessing them, caught using them, and others who are suspected of distributing or dealing them. Is there a different metric that you apply to those two classes of people? I mean, when it comes to charging or seeking to put them in jail?
So I always charge cases in whatever way is most appropriate under the law. So if it is a sale of heroin case, say, for example, I would charge it as sale of heroin. How my office treats it and the lens that we're viewing it through does depend on, is this a person that is selling drugs to make a profit on the misery of others, or is this a person that is selling just to support their own habit? In my mind, it's very different. It's also important to me, I have a lot of periods of time where I'm connected to the families. I spend as much time speaking with parents of adult children that are, say, 25, 30 years old that are addicted, where the parents are asking, how did we get here and what do we do from here? And so that's something that is not within my purview of, I don't talk about it a lot because I'm like the keeper of secrets. I know a lot of families that are struggling with a lot of very traumatic, very personal issues, and I try my best to keep those things out of the spotlight. So some of the people that I have prosecuted are just coming here to make a profit. They see a business opportunity, they come to Vermont, and they're selling, sometimes fentanyl-laced heroin to our kids and our young adults. And so those are the folks that I'm looking to get bail on. They're not individuals that I have a great confidence that they're going to return to face justice in our community. You know, the role of state's attorney is not, it's changed in the last 10 years in that people frequently look to us as social workers. I do a lot more social working than I do anything else as far as we deal with all of the mental health cases in Bennington County. So more than half the phone calls I get on any given weekend will be someone that's in mental health crisis and law enforcement's been called and they're looking for guidance about what to do with that. Folks that need a guardian, a public guardian that maybe have developmental disabilities. These are all of the factors that make it so important for someone to be part of the community fabric. So I have been here my whole life other than when I've been in school. And I returned here and that's how I address cases. I look at them and think, this is a person that we want to invest our time and energy into, trying to rehabilitate them, trying to get them the services they need. And I firmly believe that everyone, it's never too late for anyone. And so I work hard to try to help make people successful. Obviously, my ultimate goal would be to not have folks breaking the law and to not have...
Put yourself out of a job.
Exactly, to not have people addicted to drugs, and because it's heartbreaking. And it's heartbreaking when you know their families and you know their backgrounds, and you know it's people that I've known my whole life. And so, but I still wholeheartedly believe that we can make a difference. The criminal justice system can make a difference. The part that makes it sometimes difficult for people to swallow is the idea that, but some people do go to jail, and that's the right outcome too. You know, my job is to look at public safety, community safety. It's to weigh all of those factors and make sure that the folks that are in the community, the violent felons, the sex offender, you know, predatory sex offenders, those are the folks that I have an obligation to keep our community safe. And when you've done my job for 3 terms, plus my 5 years as a deputy, you're going to have people that are going to be unhappy because you've had their family member or friend in jail.
Right. Now, again, another one of the issues that seems to have emerged is this whole question, and I guess it grew out of an article that was in 7 Days, the news magazine, I guess it's based in Burlington, ran a story that suggested the incarceration rates in Bennington County were higher than the state average, or much higher than really, I think we're the highest county in terms of per capita incarceration in the state. Is that a fair assessment, or was there some issues with the data on that one?
That was not a fair assessment, Andrew. They were relying on a report from 2014, and it was literally taking a slice of one day of what the incarceration rate was on that one day. So a good example of how that fluctuates greatly is the folks that are arrested over the weekend all go to jail on Friday night. If it's a felony, the court decides that, not my office. So that was kind of the background to those numbers that I thought were not accurate given all of the numbers that the Department of Corrections puts out, and most recently the numbers, the report that they put out that talk about the fact Bennington really is smack dab in the middle, where there are multiple counties that have a higher per capita rate than Bennington. What I would say about Bennington that's very evident from reading the report, there are 8 major offenses that people are, if there is someone in jail, they are in for one of 8 major offenses. You know, aggravated assaults, sexual assaults, attempted murder. It's not, misdemeanants are not going to jail.
Right. How many cases does your office handle per year on average, roughly?
Criminal matters we handle usually less than 2,000. Then when you bring into that the increase in juvenile cases because of the opiate problem, the child protective cases have gone through the roof. So we probably have 300 or so of those, and then probably another 100 mental health cases that we deal with. But they all vary in how much time they consume. My office utilizes the Center for Restorative Justice. I've spearheaded a number of programs with them to keep kids, juvenile pre-charge programs, diversion programs, a DLS diversion program. One of the things that I've been working on steadily over the last couple of years are the people that have lost their driver's license and then they get a criminal citation because they've repeatedly driven with no license. Frequently, when you look behind why that is, it's because they just can't get out from under the fines and the fees, and most people, when they work with diversion, they work out a way to make the payments to, and it's a program through the Department of Motor Vehicles, and they can get their license back. And ultimately, that's what we want, right? We don't want people being stopped for not having a license if they genuinely want one and they just can't. Someone that's working a blue-collar job is going to have a very difficult time paying hundreds of dollars in fees, and they only go up every time you get stopped again. So,
or being dependent on someone else to get them from
right.
home to work or
And we're in a
wherever
very
else.
rural state. You know,
Yeah.
what do you tell the person in Sandgate that needs to get to Manchester to work? So it's
Hitchhike, huh?
right, right.
I guess that's what it comes down to. One thing we talked about this actually fairly recently, but just to kind of include it in this discussion, as we all know, on July 1st, the rules around marijuana are going to be changing. You can now possess up to an ounce of marijuana and grow 6 plants for, let's see if I get this right, 2 mature and 4 immature?
Yes.
Okay. Do you foresee any additional complications for law enforcement growing out of this changeover?
I do, only in the idea that I just am not convinced that folks are really clear on what the law is. So part of my mission has been to make sure people are informed about what the law actually is, because the criminal justice system is not intended to kind of catch people by surprise and grab them for some criminal offense where they didn't even know they were breaking the law. And so the law changes, folks are really counting on that changing marijuana usage in Vermont significantly. And it's not really significantly. You can have 4 immature and 2 mature plants per household. So that means if there are 4 or 6 folks living there, you can't all have that many plants.
Just one, huh?
Just one set, right? And so those are some of the challenges I think we're going to face from a law enforcement perspective. It's because I will get the cases where someone has 10 plants, and so then we're looking at that case trying to determine, is this really a person that is intentionally violating the criminal law, and should it matter if they're intentionally violating it or not? And what do we do in my system for how to deal with that in my sphere of control? So it's going to be a lot more work probably with diversion, because they do our treatment diversion program, which has been amazing, truly amazing for getting folks hooked up with services. Young people, I'm concerned about the message that they're getting around marijuana, that it's
somehow okay.
That it's okay now, and that, don't you have anything better to do than to harass me about marijuana usage? It's not so much that bright line. It's about whether they're old enough or not. It's where their brains are developmentally and where, other factors are in their life. And it's just one more thing that there's a reason it's 21. But it'll be a constant, that's something that my office weighs in on a lot. And I've been able to keep Bennington at the forefront of juvenile justice, criminal justice. Senator Sears is the chair of Senate Judiciary. I'm in regular contact with him about youthful offender justice, the treatment diversion. We were one of the first counties to just essentially make this program from whole cloth, and work collaboratively with our partners to just try to use a common sense approach to all of this.
So one inconsistency that's always struck me about the way we wound up with the marijuana rules today, or what they will be on July 1st, is that you're okay if you're possessing it, but acquiring it puts you into a different category. If you're unlucky enough to be overseen by a law enforcement officer handing
Purchasing,
cash
yes.
for product, you're in the
Correct.
crosshairs. If you're
Right.
at home with it,
You're fine.
or even driving in your car with it, as long as you're not consuming it.
That's right. So that's in part what concerns me. It's the internal inconsistencies as well in the law. So the idea that folks, we've had multiple trainings. My office has put on multiple trainings for law enforcement. They've also done it at the state level with the Vermont State Police, so that the people in the community that are, enforcing this know exactly what the law is. It concerns me, the sale piece concerns me because I feel like it's keeping that part of it underground. So in a situation where you're buying marijuana from someone that maybe you don't know where it's come from. I've had multiple reports about various toxins being introduced into the marijuana that is being sold. The people purchasing it have no idea that it's in there. And so I'm concerned with, and I think that having the structure we have now is maybe the beginnings of how do we hone this law so that it's something, if someone wants to smoke marijuana, they can do so and it's safe. I think they're just assuming everyone's going to grow their own, and not everyone has a green thumb. So,
Well, we're almost out of time here, but just one last question I thought I'd throw your way is, are there any major issues you see coming down the road in the next year or so, if you're reelected to this post, you will be grappling with?
Well, aside from kind of all the usual stuff,
Right.
there have been, I'm on the opiate response team in Bennington, which is after Peter Welch's visit. We were quite vocal when he visited to talk about the opiate problem in Bennington and how specifically it needs to be dealt with in Bennington. We are sometimes overlooked because we are the southernmost county, and I have inserted myself into many of those conversations just to make sure that Bennington is not only part of the conversation, but receiving some of the funding. So we do need more infrastructure, and it's like a catch-22. We've made do, we've made things work because I have relationships with all of the other partners, and we all regularly meet and discuss how we're going to, on a practical level, and that's what I love about here as opposed to someplace like Connecticut. We are small enough so that we know the folks we're talking about and the families that need help, and how do we get them connected to certain people. And we know the cases that we have to be concerned about someone's safety. So that's an issue that I think is developing rather quickly. There was some federal funding that will be made available, and it'll be coming to the state of Vermont. And I've been vocal that that money needs to come to Bennington. Frequently they talk about southern Vermont, but then that includes Brattleboro, Rutland, and sometimes Windsor even. And I mean Bennington.
Yeah, right.
We need the money here.
Look at the map.
So I spend a fair amount of time working on that issue, but I think it's really been great. They're using Bennington as a model for some of the new juvenile justice legislation that's also taking effect this year, because Dick Sears and I worked closely on how to make that happen. And then the expungement programs have been, I found mine to be extremely personally rewarding, but I see that there are some issues with the legislation as it currently is. So I've been working with Senator Sears on that, and I think, those are the kind of issues that develop over time, and you really need to know the community, the partners, the social values that our community holds to really be able to do the job of state's attorney.
All right. Well, I'm sure we could go on talking about this for a lot longer, but we're just about out of time now.
Yep.
But I want to thank Erica Marthage for being here with us today to share some of her thinking about the role of the state's attorney. And she is running for re-election this year in the Democratic primary, first of all, and then presumably in the general election as well in November. So anyway, I want to thank Erica for showing up today. I want to thank you as well for watching and being with us today. Hope you found it interesting. and we'll see you again the next time. Have a great day.